a second time, Texas Democrats are attempting to block Republican-led voting restriction bills. 6 weeks ago, they left the state capitol in Austin just before the end of the legislative session. This time, they fled the state to Washington, D.C. That denies Republicans a quorum needed to vote in the special session called after the first walkout. Here's what one state Democrat said about the move.
And we're not doing this for Democrats. We're doing this for Republicans. We're doing this for independents. We're doing this for North Texans and South Texans and East and West Texans. We're doing this for Catholics and Protestants. Anybody in the state of Texas who needs to exercise the right to vote should do so freely. And we are not going to buckle to the big lie in the state of Texas, the big lie that has resulted in anti-democratic legislation throughout the United States.
Those lawmakers are now bringing a national spotlight to their fight by meeting with top members of Congress and White House officials. Vice President Harris praised the group in a meeting with them earlier.
I talked about exactly what I believe about the courage and the commitment and the patriotism that you all have evidenced by your actions in addition to your work and your words. And I know what you have done comes with great sacrifice, both personal and political. And you are doing this in support and in defense of some of our nation's highest ideals. Reporters ask me, well, what do you think about the issue? I say, look, defending the right of the American people to vote is as American as apple pie.
For more on this, let's bring in Renuka Rayasam. She covers Texas politics, policy, and healthcare for Politico. She's also the author of the Politico nightly newsletter. Welcome, Renuka. Thanks very much for being with us. So let's talk about what the Democrats are actually trying to stop. How could these two Republican-led bills impact future elections in Texas?
Well, the impact themselves is unclear, but what the bills do is make it a little harder to vote. So Harris County, which includes Houston, for example, they pioneered all of these new forms of voting, like drive-through voting and 24-hour voting, and this bill would prohibit that type of voting. It would prohibit election officials from sending out applications to mail-in ballots unsolicited. It would have new ID requirements, and it would make it have more partisan oversight of elections. I talked to one Republican lawmaker yesterday in Texas who actually was worried that these restrictions could backfire on Republicans because in 2020 we actually saw higher turnout across the board. And that favored Republicans, and former President Trump, actually won Texas in 2020. And so the impact is a bit unclear, but for sure it would add a lot of hurdles to voting in the state.
Well, Renuka, why did those Texas Democrats flee to Washington, and when are they expected to return?
Sure. So, the regular session ended at the end of May. Governor Abbott called this special session and said he really wants this voting reform bill, this elections bill, to pass. And we had a number of House Democrats, at least 50 House Democrats that fled to Washington, D.C. yesterday. And some are there today. And there's some Texas senators, Democratic senators that are there today. And by doing that, they don't allow the House to have a quorum required to actually vote on these bills. And so unless you have a required number of lawmakers actually in the Capitol on the floor voting, then the House can't take these bills up. They say that they're going to be away until the special session is scheduled to end August 6th, so they'll be in D.C. until then. But after that, Governor Abbott can call another special session and keep calling special sessions until these bills pass. In 2003, it took 3 sessions for a redistricting bill to pass because Democrats kept fleeing the state. And then Governor Rick Perry called 3 special sessions and finally got the redistricting legislation passed. And we could see something like that this time around as well.
So if that's the case, Renuka, first of all, what has been the reaction from Republican Governor Greg Abbott? And then what appears to be the objective here for Texas Democrats, if in fact the governor can just keep calling more of these special sessions?
That's a good question. The governor today said that Texas Democrats are shirking their duty, that they're abdicating their responsibility. Today on the House floor, the House lawmakers actually voted to use law enforcement to get some of these Democrats back. The reality is Texas law enforcement doesn't have jurisdiction in D.C., and so these lawmakers could be arrested if they come back to Austin, if they come back to Texas and the Capitol, and so that's something there. But their objective is, at the moment, it's to stall these bills and to put some attention on them. They're saying that they're lobbying Congress to pass the federal legislation that would make it easier to vote and counteract these Republican proposals in Texas. But of course, the reality in Washington is that there's not enough votes on the Democratic side to pass the For the People Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. But that's their hope now, is to get attention, to at least stall and delay this, and hope that maybe Abbott doesn't keep calling special sessions, and that their hope is that this bill backfires on Republicans.
So that was going to be my question, though, about what it was that these Texas Democrats were hoping to actually get from their meetings in Washington, D.C., because as you pointed out, and earlier in the program was pointed out, the political reality when it comes to federal voting rights legislation is really tough for those Texas Democrats who are I'm sure, very aware of that political landscape right now. So, at this point, is it just essentially putting off what would seem to be almost inevitable at this point?
Texas Democrats have not held power in the state for a long time. And the reality in Texas is that sometimes Democrats win by losing. And I think, they cannot forever forestall this voting reform bill from passing if the governor can just keep calling special sessions. I mean, like I said, the hope is that that maybe they'll call the governor's bluff, that he won't want to call another session, but at the moment it's a standoff, and all they can do is delay this bill. They can't stop it forever. If Republicans really want to pass it, they hold the governorship, they hold the lieutenant governorship, they hold the Texas House, they hold the Texas Senate. So the reality in Texas is that Democrats don't have a lot of power. This is all they can do, and like I said, they're trying to maybe win by losing here eventually, win the battle, even if they lose the war.
So the walkout also holds up, as I understand it, a vote on funding for the state's legislative staff. Why is that problematic for Democrats?
Right. So Governor Abbott, at the end of the regular session, he did this line item veto, and it vetoes funding for lawmakers' salary. And in Texas, lawmakers here don't make a lot. It's a part-time legislature. But more importantly, vetoed funding for the staff. And these are full-time staff who work at the Capitol, who work in the building, who work for these lawmakers. And, they're supporting families and they're supporting themselves. And that funding runs out September 1st. Democrats have sued over that, saying that that is beyond the governor's authority to do that line item veto. They're hoping to win in court, and they're hoping that a judge says, "You're right, the governor can't do this," and restore the funding that way. But at the moment, if that doesn't happen, if they don't win their court case, then funding for the staff, funding for lawmakers will run out in September.
All right, Renuka Rayasam for us. Renuka, always good to have you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.